and we played concerts and shows every night from the time I was 19 years old. I left my youth group, the same youth group that I got that CD from. I left that youth group to go on the road with my band Hawk Nelson, and we played every night to tons of people, sometimes nobody at all, but we'd still play the show. And that's what being in a band is all about, right? And so, as years went on and shows turned into tours and tours dragged on and on, I kind of like, what am I doing? And I guess, to be honest with you, I can say it as clearly as possible, I kind of became tired of being a spokesperson for the kingdom of God. And I say that because I had the theological background of like a 17-year-old. I didn't really know much about anything except for what my parents had taught me and what I learned in youth group, right? So when kids every night are coming up to me asking me about the questions about their mental health or suicide or God or faith or Christian music, I'm just kind of like backed into a wall being like, just give it to the Lord, kid. And they're like, yes, thank you so much. And I'm like, that's all you got to say? And I literally made a living off of doing that. And when you do that for a decade, it catches up with you real quick. And I was so over it that I didn't even know who I was after 10 years of doing that. And I didn't want to do that anymore, so I just up and left. And I figured out nothing for a long time, but I lived a life of figuring out life on my own without Jesus for about 3 years. I sold the business, Hawk Nelson, and I moved to New York City. And at that time, my marriage had completely collapsed and failed. So I was now 32 years old, living in an empty apartment in New York City, freshly divorced, and I actually ran out of money. Every single cent I made from that band, I lost it. And I will say this, there's nothing more embarrassing, nothing more humbling or humiliating than having to show up to your parents' driveway being like, hey, can I crash in my old bedroom? After a guy that had everything. I was put on such a high pedestal that I tried to live off of that for so long and my identity was taken from me. And I ended up just crashing at my parents' house. I quit music for over a decade. I worked in the lumber yard trying to figure life out. So years go by and I started seeing this girl who I had met previously in New York from Ireland. Her name was Neve. And we've been married 10 years now. And we have 3 amazing kids, 4 in total. No, we have 3 kids. But anyways, during this whole time of me deconstructing my faith and no longer admitting that there was a God, my mom and dad, bless their hearts, are still like super spiritual. They're those righteous zealots, and they've been that way like my whole life. And my mom over and over was like, baby, you just need Jesus. You just got to go to church. And I was like, Mom, full stop. I'm like, I tried that. I did that my whole life because of you guys. And it's cool that works for you and dad, but it just doesn't work for me. And so anyways, I started seeing this girl, Neve from Ireland, who started visiting and flying out. My mom's like, who's this pretty Irish girl that keeps coming to visit? And like when you're like in your 30s, it's awkward. You're like, Mom, like, we're just friends. Like, I'm like, why are we having this conversation, you know? So my mom found a loophole, and she's like, this girl Neve's like, hey, we're gonna go to church with your parents in the morning. I'm like, what? And I'm like, she found a loophole. My mom, she's like, knew I would say no, so she asked her, because she's not gonna say no to my mom, and I'm not gonna say no to her. So we went to this church service together, and this wasn't like the church I grew up in. This was like the creepy church, the crazy church in our town. They swing flags. They ran around, like the old ladies ran around the chairs and stuff. People were speaking in tongues. It was that kind of church, which I was kind of familiar with, but I knew she was from Ireland. She went to Mass. That was her idea of a church. And I'm like, girl, you have not experienced North American church. And I was like, this girl's gonna dump me. It's over. Whatever this is, it's over. And it just wouldn't happen to be the day that the church was putting on a special presentation of Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames. Anybody seen that skit? I'm a creature that values excellence. And this was put on by the local church that they just were literally feeding each other lines. And I'm like, oh, this is a disaster. But anyways, after the hour and 20-minute presentation of people drinking and driving and burning in hell, the pastor came up for the altar call. And I'm looking around me, and everybody in these seats were like 100. And they're all wearing like the same like navy suit. And he's giving this powerful altar call to the same congregants he's been speaking to for 50 years. And I'm like, bro, nobody's gonna put their hand up. These are all your people. Like, the cynic inside of me was this. He's wasted his week of preparing his sermon that's gonna land on nobody. But then out of compassion and pity, he asked everyone to bow their heads and close their eyes. And I was familiar with this because I grew up with this. And out of respect, I closed my eyes and I bowed my head. I peeked. I did the seeing, making sure no one put their hand up, because I'm like, no one's gonna put their hand up. I had to just check it. But in this moment, my life changed forever, because that sweet girl from Ireland that my mom invited to church, she dug her elbow into the side of me. And I've told this story 100 times or more. And it wrecks me every time because it's powerful and it's true. And what it did to me, it can do the same to you. She whispered in my ear. What I thought she was going to say was, hey, can we get out of here? But instead she said this. She's like, hey, would you go to the front with me? And instantly, my life changed forever. I was like, yeah. And we walked to that front together, just her and I, nobody else. Well, this little old lady with like a pamphlet, a brochure for when the next service was, and to make sure she got our contact information. And she was like rubbing our backs, and we said that prayer collectively together, and our lives changed forever. And that was 11 years ago. Yeah. And that's where I've been. Jesus has showed himself real to me, and he's not let us down, even though I've let him down time and time again. And I worked at a church for the last 7 years. And then I started doing these festivals, these little one-offs, and I was like, what am I doing with my life? If I go another 10 years just working at a church, which I love, but like, you're my people. And I feel very fortunate and very happy to be here tonight, to be doing this again. And I look forward to what God's going to do in this season of my life. And yeah, that's my story.
All right.
I wrote this song right after I left the band Hawk Nelson, and I wrote this to them.